Welcome to Transformational Leadership, the podcast for leaders building high-performance organizations and teams. In every episode, you will hear from executives and transformation experts who've led with vision, executed under pressure, and delivered real, scalable, and impactful results. You'll hear practical insights and leadership stories from executives who've driven change, delivering transformation, and consistently winning in highly complex environments. No fluff, just frameworks, lessons, and stories from the front lines of leadership. If you're serious about building competitive impact through people, you're in the right place. Here is your host, Jeff Harnois.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Transformational Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Harnois. Today, my guest is Dr. Regis Chasse, founder and chief learning officer of CLO Advisors, serving mid-size to large organizations with talent development solutions. He's the winner of 31 Learning, Innovation, and Transformation Awards. I'm super excited for this conversation with Dr. Chasse. His career spans over 20 years at Capgemini as the head of global curricula. He was the dean of the Leadership Institute with Majid Al-Futem. And then many of our viewers will be familiar with Heidrick and Struggles, where Dr. Chasse was the head of global leadership development, the practice there. Dr. Chasse is an expert in measuring impact in both transformations and L&D investments, which I'm sure many of you are going to be curious to know more about. And if that's not enough, Dr. Chasse is an executive steering committee member for the Learning Impact certification from the European Foundation for Management Development, and so much more. I invite you to take a look at his impressive LinkedIn profile to see the full scope and span of his contributions to transformational leadership. With that in mind, Dr. Chasse, thank you so much for joining us today. It's an honor to have you on the show.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, nice to see you. Let's go ahead and start with the Capgemini conversation, a consulting organization that I think many people would be familiar with. You were working at a time when Capgemini was in kind of a large merger and acquisition modality on a global scale. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that time in your life and what you were up to?
Absolutely. So, in full transparency, I joined Capgemini in 98, and then in the IT consulting world, the 2000 was a big moment for IT consulting. Every company was afraid of the 2000 shift of the systems. So there was a very aggressive growth in the IT service industry in general, and Capgemini absolutely was benefiting also of that growth. And Capgemini had grown through many acquisitions, and it was still a very multinational organization. I don't use the word global purposely. It was a multinational organization, and it was really a federation of many IT service firms that were serving their local markets and their regional clients. And we were at a stage where we were starting to have some global clients, the likes of HSBC, where we had to support them, from Australia to Netherlands to France, UK, and the US. And at that point in time, we realized that our teams were not speaking the same language. We're not using the same tools, and we're not using the same methodologies to resolve the client's problems.
If I could just jump in there. I'm guessing that the lack of continuity in all of those aspects, not speaking the same language, the same business language, I would say, not using the same tools, not using the same methodologies, probably led to what I would consider an incongruent client experience. Is that Is that true?
Absolutely. Also, we were making it harder for ourselves
Mm,
than it needed to be. And when I say harder for ourselves, that impacts, of course, maybe the customer experience, although I would argue that we were so obsessed by customer satisfaction that actually maybe it was not that visible, but internally we were penalizing ourselves in terms of resourcing and efforts, which ultimately impacts profit margin, right? It was evident at that point in time that we had to be able to serve those global clients in a more efficient way, with one way of working, one way of speaking the same language, and to hand over deliverables, across countries, and we would understand each other, and there would be continuity in the support of the client. So that was the business problem that we were with.
just out of curiosity, and it's okay if you don't have this answer, but did anybody try to get any sort of measurement, from a cost standpoint or a scale standpoint, how big this problem was or how it was affecting the business?
I am not aware of any measurement at that point in time. Later on, we have put in place some measurement to fine tune our processes and tools and etc. But at that point in time, I was not aware of measurements. There must have been measurements on profits, but I was not in the loop at that point.
So how were you thinking about the opportunity to create and deliver, the transformation that we're talking about? How did you think about it, and how did you see it initially?
First, this was a transformation that was mandated by the CEO directly. So it's not Regis who came up with the transformation agenda at all. It's the CEO that really mobilized the organization behind this one firm mandate to become really one global firm, which meant many things in leadership. For instance, they were placing people from different countries leading other countries, just to give that more rounded leadership across the organization. And on my side, more from an organizational capability standpoint, I was really involved with developing toolkits and methodologies that very specific professions, namely project managers and enterprise architects, should use globally as a single standard, so that we can run those engagements for those global clients.
So can I just read that back? It sounds like what you did is you had a look at all of the various audiences in the organization, and you picked a couple as the starting point, for the transformation. And just out of curiosity, what drove the decision to pick those two groups over others?
Those two roles, when you run an IT engagement, are the most important roles to set up and start an engagement, and to deliver on the promise to the client. So the enterprise architects really designs the solution that will support that global client, and the project manager ensures that it's implemented the proper way, and risk are managed, and it's delivered to the satisfaction of the client, but also with the margin that we're expecting.
Hmm. So these were two client-facing organizations, and maybe even integrated into at the client level. And so again, as I'm thinking about this, and tell me if this is wrong, the selection process of those two groups was really based on where you're going to maximize your impact with the transformation initiative. Is that true?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, good. What happened next?
So by training originally, I am an architect, a computer engineer, and an enterprise architect, and so I started with that piece of work around ways of working that is consistent globally for enterprise architects to support those global clients. And so we brought together some top consultants in that space, and we developed those toolkits and methodologies together, which then we had to deploy across the organization. But at that time, we had separated the consulting population serving global clients from the other consultants who were serving more local clients. So at that point in time, we were talking about initially for the enterprise architects, maybe 200, 250 consultants to train, which is feasible, realistic. And then also we did the same with project managers, where it was a bit easier because there are already industry standards. There were already industry standards in place that we were also able to leverage in addition to some internal best practices. And what I mean by industry standard, I'm talking about Project Management Institute and the PMP certifications. And
So what comes to mind there is, are these US based standards that you were implementing on a global level? Were they global standards that were already known and adopted? What do you think?
so there were three standards that we were playing with. One, Project Management Institute. Second, Prince2, and third, UPM, Unified Project Management, which brought agile into the ways of working for project managers. And ultimately, we leverage those three standards to really bring our own internal standard. And in Europe, I can tell you that when somebody was looking for a job who had been a Capgemini level 4 project manager, the rest of the IT organizations knew exactly what it meant. I mean, that kind of project manager can manage a $100 million IT project. So that's how we were able, over more than a decade, to institutionalize those roles. So that was working quite well. We had to refine, of course, quite a few things, but we were learning through that. And then at one point, it was decided that those standards that we had developed to support global clients, why do we have one standard for global clients and no standards for the others?
Right.
So then the challenge was, can we use those standards that we just developed, those toolkits, for the rest of the organization to support all our clients, but also to provide a career progression and a career track for our consultants, joining in as a junior project manager and growing into a more mid-complexity type project, and then going into a more master type project manager. And
I have to think that, even though this isn't the point of the transformation, the consideration of growth and career tracks for these key employees must have aided with things like retention and probably translated into better customer engagement and satisfaction scores. Is that true?
The primary concern was delivery risks and profit margin preservation. That was the primary driver. Actually, at that point in time, I was part of a group called Group Delivery, which was looking at the delivery risk of the major projects of the organization. And when we decided to make those toolkits and standards more standard for the entire consulting population, that's when I started to create some schools, a school of project management and school of enterprise architects. And that's when I shifted to Capgemini University.
I see.
And because the problem was no longer to train 250 project managers and 250 enterprise architects. It was to train 60,000 consultants.
Yeah, it was to install those standards across the entire enterprise.
Exactly. But the driver was always, and I was reporting as head of the schools. I was reporting to one of my stakeholders, was part of that delivery organization that I mentioned, and they were a key stakeholder of that curriculum and that career track, basically.
I think one of the things that is really interesting to me on this, Dr. Chasse, is I know a lot of L&D organizations, are looking for their value proposition in organizations. It sounds like what you did is sort of integrated the whole learning process and alignment with organizational goals and metrics. It feels like this is what it feels like, and I'd actually love to get your response to this. It feels to me like you're being integrated into the business without being integrated into the business.
It is absolutely right, and that's why I said at the beginning that mandate was coming from the CEO. It was a transformation, a group-wide transformation that included what I described, but there were many other aspects to it. And for my part of the mandate, we were coming from a practitioner standpoint. I was an enterprise architect, right, initially, and we were driven by customer satisfaction and delivery risks and minimizing delivery risks. So we really brought the business language into and created a learning organization to support those objectives.
Love it. What was the so you started with a target group in the organization. You understood then that what you built became scalable for the entire enterprise. You then moved to, essentially deliver what you were doing at scale for the entire enterprise. I'm assuming that some really magnificent things happened as a result of this. Can you talk about some of the impacts of this transformation?
Before I go to the impact, just one clarification. When we shifted the mandate from just serving global clients to becoming a global standard for the entire organization, we also had to readapt those toolkits to be scalable to the size of the client and the client engagement, because we were no longer dealing with only complex global organizations, but we had also to be able to scale back a little bit those standards and checklists and methods to smaller clients and smaller organizations.
Yeah, that's fascinating to me.
We had to adapt also that change of mandate also to the new mandate, to make sure that we were able to address with the right toolkits and set of methods the right level of clients. In terms of impact, we were able to correlate. We had an index, the delivery value index, and this is a combination of how far are we in a project compared to what was planned to be delivered at this point in time in the projects. How many resources did we use so far compared to what we had planned and what we did deliver? And that DVI index was something that we were starting to look. We were quite obsessed by it, frankly. And on an biannual basis, so twice a year, we were looking at the top projects and how we were performing with the DVI on those projects. And gradually, we were seeing that that index was becoming better and better, and the outliers that were really out of when you have thousands of engagement, there are always a few that are not doing so well. So then we were able to first identify what are those projects, second, to support them in a very specific way, and three, also see that the trend over time was becoming um, positive in terms of preserving the profit margin, but also satisfying the clients. The other metric that we used was OTACE, OTACE, on time and above customer expectations.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I love that as a measurement, and I love that as a bar. That's fantastic.
On time speaks for the profit margin and customer expectations and customer satisfaction.
Yeah, I think customer satisfaction then goes back to maybe NPS and the stickiness of the client and retention and future revenues, the whole thing. Um, I'm interested to hear, were there any unexpected problems, any unanticipated issues that got in the way, either in that first phase where you were looking at that segmented group, or in the transformation into, doing this at the enterprise level? Any big things, any big impediments get in the way that you weren't anticipating?
Actually, it was towards the end that to complement those toolkits. Remember that story? We were able to have now a set of recognized proficiencies at different level of clients, and we had put in place also some internal certifications to recognize, your project manager level 1, you can manage, a $5 million project, or you are project manager level 4 and you can manage a $100 million project. And as we implemented this type of certification, internal certifications, we knew exactly within the organization globally how many project managers we had at each level, how many enterprise architects we had at each level. And by the way, since the beginning of that story, we had also started to implement the same type of approach for software engineers and so business analysts and many other professions. And I was starting to get involved in conversations with business leaders. Specifically, I remember vividly a conversation I had with the CEO of cloud services, which was booming at that time. And he was telling me, we need to grow by 30% in Australia next year. I need so many enterprise architects level 3. I need so many project managers level 2 and level 3. What is best? Do we move them from different regions or countries? Do we develop them from within? How many do we have today? I was having an HR conversation without knowing that it was an HR conversation, without recognizing that it was an HR conversation. And that created tension with my HR counterparts. What do you mean you have that conversation? So that was interesting to see how at that time we really had to be more integrated also with our HR organization and bring them up to speed to what we had done and bring them into those conversations.
Nice. And then, when you think about the entire experience for you, I want to ask you two quick questions here. What was the most profound thing you learned during that experience? And if you had one piece of wisdom to share with others who are, in transformation or in leadership transformation based on that experience, what would that be?
I think we started to, so number one, personally, that was such a profound experience because I had left my craft, being a computer engineer, software engineer, and enterprise architect, to becoming a general manager, change management manager at the headquarters, to becoming a learning architect, organizational capability builder. So from a personal standpoint, that was a very profound shift in my career. And at many points in time, I was like, am I ready to shift there? And am I ready to shift there again? And etc. The second point is that what I brought to ultimately the learning team was actually my knowledge of what we were doing for clients, my understanding of what projects are, and a sense.
The subject matter expertise.
Not only, it's hard when you are part of a corporate team to truly understand what our consultants are living day in, day out with the clients. I had that experience. So I was bringing that lens to our corporate team. And that was bringing, I think, two things. One, being obsessed about customer satisfaction. And two, a sense of urgency that was not necessarily naturally there as part of corporate teams.
What bit of wisdom would you share with others?
I would say what made it work was that we were fully aligned with the business. We were talking to the business on an ongoing basis. We had established a strong governance of those schools of project management and enterprise architects and etc. with the business, with the delivery risk team, corporate team, and later on with HR. Since so really being that platform, that platform for supporting that transformation was really one of the rare places where all those stakeholders were talking to each other about that transformation. So we were kind of a centerpiece. We were not the initiator of it, but we were kind of a centerpiece where the right conversations were taking place.
Mm-hmm. What's coming up for me in this is when I think about L&D organizations at the enterprise level, um, there, there's a little bit of a mindset shift opportunity that comes from this story for me. And it's simply this. The mindset is you're not here to deliver learning and development, which is, where a lot of L&D organizations land. They think about, how can we provide knowledge, and then they look at Udemy or LinkedIn Learning or other resources. The mindset shift for me is, how do we make a difference in the organization? How do we enable them to move forward and achieve their goals through learning and through development? And I think that's the inspirational takeaway for me for this story is you were integrated into the business without being integrated into the business. You were talking to them on a regular basis. In your particular case, not only were you bringing subject matter expertise, but you understood the experience that your target audiences were having with clients. You understood what clients were having as an experience and being able to bring that to shape this outcome. I think that's phenomenal. And again, if I were to just sort of offer some unsolicited advice to listeners, if you're in that space of learning and development, work really, really hard at getting closer to the business and shift the mindset to we're here to transform and make a difference versus we're here to deliver training.
I couldn't say it better.
Nice. Thank you for that. That was a really interesting story. I have to tell you, I enjoyed it. Of course, again, Capgemini is a world recognized brand in their field and in their space. I know they've had exposure with many of the large brands that my organization works with on a regular basis. I'd like to sort of transfer or shift the conversation to an organization called Mujid Al Futem.
Majid Al Futem.
Futem. Okay, thank you. The organization at the time you were present there was a $10 billion organization in revenue. So really, really good size enterprise, 50,000 employees. And, if I recall from our previous conversation, this was an organization that was in the traditional brick and mortar retail space. And they were having a lot of competition that was urging, in the digital world and in the online world. And the transformation there was how to move that organization, not necessarily to sunset or retire the brick and mortar aspects of the operation, but to expand into the online world. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that, your role, and what that initiative looked like?
Yes, absolutely. So first, the location. So Majida Futem, headquartered in Dubai, and Majida Futem is a conglomerate primarily in retail, the likes of local Walmarts and Carrefour, in entertainment. So some entertainment parks. Maybe you may have heard about the ski, the indoor ski in Dubai. That's Majida Futem. They are often recognized for that. And also they are the leader movie distribution chain called Vox in the region. So really serving around 20 countries in the Gulf. And definitely the Gulf, the Middle East, was quite isolated from the early growth of Alibaba and Amazon and AliExpress and suddenly the Middle East was becoming quite an attractive market for those organizations. And Majida Futem was, as you mentioned, coming from a tradition of brick and mortar, building assets that will bring clients and revenue. Also, I didn't mention, but they do build the largest shopping malls in the world, which that ski slope was part of, by the way. So the tradition was really to build movie theaters, to build grocery stores, to build shopping malls, to build indoor ski slopes, and then to operate them. And that was really the model up to that point. And then Amazon is coming in, and then Netflix is coming in, right? So there was a transformation again from the very top, from the founder, Mr. Majida Futem, who was the chairman at the point in time, and from the office of the CEO, there was a transformation agenda that was put in place around 3 pillars to be able to face this new marketplace. So the first priority was around leadership. How do we ensure that we have the right leadership in place to innovate at the pace that those other players are innovating at? 2, how do we leverage AI and analytics the way the Amazon of the world, are knowing their customers better than the customers know themselves, through analytics and AI, right? And then 3, how do we double down on customer experience? So those were the 3 pillars of that transformation: leadership, analytics and technology, and customer experience. And I was asked to come to this organization to support that transformation. Those are 3 agendas through a leadership institute. And here, the Leadership Institute target audience was primarily the leaders of the organization. So when we say leaders of the organization, I would say out of a population, out of a size of 50,000 employees, there are maybe 5,000 to 8,000 leaders / managers within that organization. And so how do we onboard and make those leaders champion of that transformation and take ownership of that transformation at their level within the organization, and on those 3 different agendas. So we created a school of leadership, we created a school of analytics and technology, and then a school of customer experience, focusing on those 3 agendas. And ultimately, every leader, after that was over a period of 5 years, every leader should have been reached through those schools. And those schools were a way to demystify what the transformation was about, demystify what AI analytics and technology are, coming from a brick and mortar it's not easy. It's not easy to understand what digital and what AI can do for you. So um, we so over that period of 5 years, we were able to mobilize most of those 8,000 leaders around those three agendas.
Can I jump in with a question here? The it's rattling around in my head, so I want to ask and see what you think. Oftentimes, when I think about transformation, especially on the human side of transformation, one of the topics that's always on my mind is psychological resistance, and that may be casting this too narrow. It may be more than just psychological resistance. In this case, what I'm anticipating, and I could be wrong, and that's why I really want to hear your thoughts on this. The resistance comes from maybe one that's more experiential in its origin. People who had that brick and mortar, that in-person, face-to-face customer experience, sort of foundation, now moving into a completely virtual world. I want to be kind here, but some people just didn't get it.
That's correct. Some people didn't get it, and those sometimes were exited because they were not able to adapt to the new world, or not willing to adapt to the new world.
I think the way you said that is actually right. What it comes down to, the remedy to the resistance, again, whether it's psychological or something else, is really adaptability. What is the adaptability of the individual? What is the adaptability of the organization? How did you assess and approach, identifying those folks that just simply weren't going to make this transition?
So, as part of that leadership agenda, which was quite massive, and there were many more than just a leadership institute involved in that leadership agenda. Number one, there was a definition of a leadership competency model. How do we define the leaders within Majid Futem, and who are those leaders that we want for the future of the organization? So that was the first piece of work that had taken place. And then following that definition of who are the leaders that we want within the organization, then it was embedded in our talent acquisition processes. It was embedded into our talent management processes, into our learning processes, into our performance management processes. One of the dimensions of the leadership model is to drive innovation, for instance, is to deliver results, is to shape the future. Those dimensions were embedded. So those dimensions of the transformation were embedded into the leadership model that became the blueprint for the HR processes to bring in the right leaders that have the right mindset and the right competencies, and also to measure our current leaders against that benchmark and see how we can help them sometimes, but also who are the ones that are performing the best according to that definition of leadership that we have.
Yeah, a couple of things are coming up for me. Absolutely makes sense on the talent acquisition front. I sometimes think about this maybe too simplistically about, sort of creating the ideal persona. What does the ideal persona look like for specific roles? And, you can have some fun with that element of it. And again, so from a talent acquisition standpoint, it makes perfect sense. You want to hire the right people. When you're looking at the talent pool that was already in place, the investments that were made in hiring and training, and the institutional knowledge that was in place with those folks, the traditional methodology here is we wait to see the result. Are they adapting? Are they delivering? And that may have been the case here too, but I'm just wondering, did you have any tripwires in place that would identify those people who were not going to make the transition? Any way of identifying them or seeing them early?
So for the most influential leaders of the organization. They were all part of steering groups. And I'm talking about the top 200 leaders. They were all part of steering groups governing those three agendas. And they had to report to the CEO on a regular basis, and to the executive committee. They had to report on how they were owning their own transformation within their space and advancing. So that was the first element of visibility of progress or not. And then over time, if you sustain that over time, you may spin the progress once, but you will not spin it twice or over 2 years, right? It will show. So that was already a first forum where there was also a clear pressure, on are we collectively delivering to that transformation agenda? And those that were not delivering or challenging even that transformation were visible and identified. And then the second layer was really more more at the system level of the enterprise through that performance management. Is that leader delivering on driving innovation or being the champion of transformation that they are supposed to be? And let's receive the feedback from their own managers and from their team members. By the way, that organization, for all the 8,000 leaders of the organization, they were doing 360 feedback on all the dimensions of the leadership model that I told you.
Yeah.
So it was not only the managers providing feedback, it was also the team members providing feedback.
Awesome. So skipping forward just a little bit here, it sounds like the transformation itself was successful. You were able to help them move into that expanded digital world. First of all, is that true? Is that statement true?
So I think to a large extent, yes. When you look at the leadership agenda, it was really about building a pipeline of leaders from within, and making sure that those leaders that we support were really embracing that profile of future leaders that we had, defined for the future of the organization. And there, the pipeline depth was significantly stronger by the moment I left. On the AI and analytics and advanced analytics and technology, actually Majida Futem had become one of the recognized organization more forward thinking in terms of innovation, technology, and AI within the region.
Love that.
And there was also a third party consulting organization that was coming once a year through a digital readiness index to see if we're progressing in the right areas and what we needed to focus on every year. And then on the customer experience side, that's where I left a bit early because that was the latest school that we had set up, and really there, what was interesting, I had somebody leading that school, and what was interesting was that we were really focusing more on non-client facing leaders rather than client facing leaders. Client facing leaders, they know what how important customer experience is. And yes, we can fine tune, and yes, we can help them get even better. But what was more important was the leader of the finance department, the leader of the supply chain. Do they understand the impact that they can have on the ultimate customer experience? So those back office functions, it was about elevating and becoming customer obsessed also in those back office functions that were not facing directly clients. And that was quite successful.
I love this framing. I'm just going to tell you the parts of it that are really resonating with me when we're talking about non-customer facing roles in an organization. A lot of people can approach this, the mindset of I have a job to do and I'm going to go do my job. And they may even have the mindset of, oh, I'm going to be really good at my job. One of the frames always comes up as executional excellence. I'm really good at what I do. And they sort of lose focus with where they fit and how they contribute in terms of delivering value to an organization, especially when it relates to customers. And the way that I think about it is, again, mindset shift. If you're in an internal organization, you're not external client facing, your clients are the internal folks that you serve, and you should think about them as your clients because you should treat them as your clients. Their satisfaction should be a priority for you. That should be your success criteria versus I did my job well. And so sometimes getting organizations internally to sort of adopt that customer mentality, just that our customers are the people who serve our external customers, sort of getting that theme adopted is often a critical success factor for a lot of organizations. And I don't see many organizations that measure the effectiveness of that internally, but I think that's going to be in demand more as we go forward here. What do you think?
I think there is a theme, right, between those two stories. There's a theme which is understand the business and understand the value that you provide to your customers.
Yeah. Even if you're in what I would call an enablement role, right? If you are enabling the people who work with our customers or who drive innovation, if you enable those things, understand that that's the value that your work provides, not just that you're here to provide a function in an organization.
And I must add that it is so empowering for those teams to understand the role that they have within the organization for the clients of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
It is so. I mean, we're talking about team purpose, right? We're talking about
Exactly right.
and this is really mobilizing and unifying to bring that perspective to a team and to rally them behind those agendas.
Yeah. It does give that unity. It also gives, you use the word purpose, which I think is absolutely right. It also gives meaning to the work. And ultimately, when we start measuring things like employee satisfaction in the work they do, when we can show them the value of the work they're doing because we've given them that continuity and that purpose, um, those scores almost always jump pretty significantly. Yeah, yeah, I love that perspective. Well, Dr. Chasse, I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I have loved the content of the conversation. I love the perspectives and really the scope and scale of the transformations that you've talked about. I want to pivot to a couple of questions that I ask all of my guests, and I want you to feel free to have some fun with this. But what's the best piece of advice you ever received and didn't take?
So the remember, I one could argue that I am a recovering geek. I moved from computer science and software engineering to now being an executive coach and doing leadership development. So there has been a journey there and a transformation. And at one point in my career earlier, I was told, let your team members discover the right answer by themselves. And as an engineer, I remember I had an MBTI profile, with which was ISTJ, which the summary of it is Regis knows the solution. What was the question? So coming from that kind of person I was, and being told let your team members discover the right answer by themselves, it didn't fly for me. And you know what? 20 years later, I tried. And you know what? The answers that they were coming with were so much better than mine.
How about that? Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love everything about that story. I'm pretty well versed in Myers-Briggs, and I did not I've never had that framing of here's the answer, what was the question? I love that. I love that. That's hilarious. Excellent. And so it took you some time and you finally realized that it's better to sort of put it out there and let the team, maturate on it and cycle it and then come up with their own.
Yeah, and it was all about empowerment, right?
I think empowerment, but also ownership, which is one of the key elements for me in successful teams.
Absolutely, and but ultimately that empowerment of them exploring their own solutions, and sometimes not it was not working, and they were learning through that, fine, and so often they were coming up with a solution that none of us individually could have come up with. And that's why I like to say, 1 + 1 = 3 in that case.
Love that. Love that. In that same vein, if someone were coming into, your area of expertise, learning, teaching, development, leadership development, somebody newer in the field, and you could give them one piece of advice that would help them be successful, what would that be?
I think it's very related to the theme that we discussed, which is to not think programs for the sake of the program, but think what are the individual outcomes, what are the business outcomes that we want to generate with this initiative or this program, or and the earlier we start thinking that way, the easier it becomes to speak with the business and really bring the value that they expect.
I love that. Yeah, really, really good advice. Really good advice. And then again, in that same vein, maybe somebody who's more seasoned, you can pull from your own coaching practice or the work that you've done as an executive leader. What advice, and maybe this isn't advice per se, what bit of wisdom would you share with somebody in your peer group that has been, profoundly instrumental in your success? What would that be?
Finding ways to create a platform for business leaders to speak with each other, including you. And so the example of Capgemini was to put in place a governance with that delivery team, and the client-facing leaders and HR. That was a governance there. For Majid Futem, there were also some level of governance where it was one of the only opportunity those leaders were talking to each other about that specific topic. And we were part of that conversation. We were providing that platform. Actually, we were not bringing that much to the conversation. What was interesting was them talking to each other about that business problem. And now we knew exactly what problem we had to resolve. And therefore we were, so facilitating that kind of platform creates influence, creates business understanding.
How about that?
And you start speaking the business language. You start using the terminology of the business.
Yeah, I'm going to get the quote wrong, and I don't actually have the attribution for it, but the gist of it is a well-defined problem is a half-solved problem. And so that process you're talking about really helps you get clarity on the problem itself. But in my mind, it also helps you build some inertia and some buy-in.
Absolutely. And ultimately that allows us to let the business drive our function. For instance, when we do prioritization, Is it your challenge that is your business challenge that is the most important for the organization, or is it your business challenge, or collectively? How do we prioritize that? That gives you the legitimacy to allocate your resources accordingly.
Yeah, outstanding. Dr. Chasse, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I think our viewers are going to enjoy it as well.
Thank you very much, Jeff, for suggesting this podcast to me and for having me over.
It was an honor to have you. I'm going to show your LinkedIn profile. I think this is a good place for people to go check out your background. I also want to show your email address. People can reach out if they want to have additional conversations with you. We'll show that here. And then in addition to that, I think people should go check out your website, cloadvisors.com, at their convenience. Dr. Chasse, thanks again, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you very much.
The Transformational Leadership Podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes vision, action, diagnostics, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, be sure to let us know in the comments. We'd love you to join the conversation and help us transform the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are transforming organizations, leaders, and teams. In the meantime, be sure to like, subscribe, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.